They look like Hollywood legends carved from stone. The flashbulbs, the awards, the myth of integrity, airtight. But behind the silver screen glow, Clint Eastwood claims there were shadows most audiences never saw. At 94, the icon who built a career on grit and silence is finally speaking in ways that cut sharper than any of his Western one-liners. And the names he's putting in the crosshairs? They aren't unknown villains. They are 9 actors the world once celebrated. No cheating scandals, no sensational arrests. But according to Eastwood, the rot runs deeper. Ego, cruelty, corruption, hiding in plain sight. So why now? And why does he call them actually evil? For decades, the industry whispered. Directors hinted. Crews looked away. Now the truth is spilling out, and it's more complicated than easy headlines or fan nostalgia. This isn't about Hollywood gossip. It's about power. It's about what happens when charisma cloaks control, when respect masks intimidation. So let's rewind. Let's sift the record, the interviews, the feuds, and the rare moments where the mask slipped. Join us as we unravel Clint Eastwood's 9-name list and ask whether the legends we admire ever truly deserved our applause. Gene Hackman. It was 1992. Unforgiven was Eastwood's masterpiece, the Western that redefined his career and won 4 Oscars. But behind the camera, Eastwood later admitted, working with Gene Hackman was like staring into a storm. Hackman's performance as the sadistic sheriff Little Bill remains one of the most terrifying in modern Westerns. Yet Eastwood revealed in interviews that Hackman's darkness didn't vanish when the camera stopped rolling. According to production accounts, Hackman's temper erupted frequently on set. Crew members recalled the air growing tense whenever he walked in, not acting but looming. Clint, famously calm and reserved, clashed hard with Hackman's volatility. In American Film magazine at the time, Eastwood hinted that Hackman's intensity crossed into cruelty, making the set feel hostile. He was brilliant, Eastwood later said, but he scared people. What does it mean when an actor embodies evil so completely that colleagues feel it off camera too? Hackman's Sheriff Daggett was supposed to be a commentary on power twisted by ego. Eastwood quietly suggested that Hackman, intentionally or not, blurred that line in real life. The irony? Hackman won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for that role. Applause thundered in the Dolby Theater, while whispers backstage carried another truth, one of intimidation. Not inspiration, Hackman retired from acting in 2004, leaving a filmography of brilliance but also a trail of stories that Eastwood has since recast as warning signs. Evil, Eastwood implied, isn't always flamboyant. Sometimes it's just a simmering force in the room that makes everyone else shrink. Tommy Lee Jones. Fast forward to the year 2000. Eastwood was directing Space Cowboys, a high-concept adventure about aging astronauts. He had wrangled a dream cast. Himself, Donald Sutherland, James Garner, and Tommy Lee Jones. On paper, Jones was perfect, gruff, authoritative, a real-life Texan who radiated control. But according to crew interviews, later cited in Entertainment Weekly, Eastwood found Jones not just difficult, but corrosive. Jones was infamous even before this film for being combative with directors. Kevin Costner once called him brilliant but impossible. And on Space Cowboys, Eastwood, who had spent decades earning a reputation for calm, fast, efficient shoots, ran into a wall of resistance. Reportedly, Jones challenged directions openly, refused retakes, and bristled at Eastwood's minimalist style. One crew member alleged the set became a battlefield of wills, with Jones's sarcasm cutting through takes like a whip. Eastwood, who thrives on control, was rattled. Years later, he described Jones as talented, but he likes to push you until you push back. That tension shaped the film itself. Jones's character was written as brilliant but reckless, and his dynamic with Eastwood's character played almost too authentically. And here's where the evil label enters. Eastwood wasn't talking about cartoon villainy. He meant the subtle destruction of trust, the kind of energy that poisons collaboration. To him, Jones embodied that. Power wielded without care. Authority turned to arrogance. Space Cowboys grossed over $128 million worldwide, a commercial success. But the memory Eastwood carried wasn't triumph. It was the lesson that charisma and cruelty often travel together. And he began to name it for what it was: evil, dressed in the clothing of genius. Spike Lee. By 2008, Eastwood was a Hollywood elder statesman. Spike Lee was a bold, outspoken director, unafraid to confront race, history, and power. When Eastwood released his World War II films, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, Spike Lee publicly accused him of erasing black soldiers from the story. Lee's words cut deep. "Eastwood has a lot of knowledge, but he leaves things out," he told reporters at Cannes. For Eastwood, who prided himself on historical rigor, it was an attack on integrity. He fired back in the press, saying Lee should shut his face. The feud escalated fast, grabbing headlines worldwide. And beneath the sparring was something darker. Eastwood suggested that Lee wasn't just raising a valid critique. He was, in Eastwood's view, using provocation to elevate himself at others' expense. Was this evil? Eastwood later implied that it was, not in the supernatural sense, but in the way ambition can distort truth. For Eastwood, history was complicated. For Lee, it was urgent and raw. The clash revealed two men who saw themselves as guardians of reality, but who painted each other as manipulative. The war of words cooled eventually. Yet fans and scholars still dissect it as one of Hollywood's fiercest director-to-director clashes. To Eastwood, though, it symbolized something larger: the willingness of some in the industry to tear others down in order to climb higher. The flashbulbs popped, the cameras captured the feud, and Eastwood, for once, didn't stay silent. He marked Spike Lee's name as part of the list, a reminder that Hollywood battles aren't just fought on screen. Michael Cimino. The 1974 film Thunderbolt and Lightfoot was Clint Eastwood's first real brush with Michael Cimino. Cimino was still a rising force, fresh out of screenwriting, desperate to prove he could direct with the same intensity he wrote. Eastwood, already a bankable star, agreed to give the young filmmaker a shot. What began as an experiment in collaboration soon became a warning story Eastwood would never forget. Crew members later recalled Cimino's perfectionism morphing into obsession. He would demand take after take, adjusting camera angles by inches, ignoring time and budget constraints. For Eastwood, a man famous for wrapping films ahead of schedule and under budget, Cimino's methods were the definition of chaos. In interviews, Eastwood admitted he almost walked off the set, feeling the director was less interested in storytelling and more consumed with control, and history seemed to prove him right. Cimino would go on to direct Heaven's Gate, 1980, the notorious box office disaster that bankrupted United Artists. Critics labeled him a genius-turned-tyrant. Eastwood's private conclusion was harsher. Genius wasn't an excuse for cruelty, nor was art worth trampling crews, budgets, and careers. In Eastwood's mind, Cimino embodied a particular Hollywood evil, the ego so inflated it devours not just its maker but everyone around it. To Clint, that wasn't brilliance. It was destruction, disguised as vision. Richard Burton. 1968's Where Eagles Dare remains one of the most iconic war adventures ever filmed. Clint Eastwood was cast as the cool, precise American lieutenant. Richard Burton, already a global star and notorious for his tempestuous life with Elizabeth Taylor, played the commanding officer. On screen, Burton exuded authority and charisma. Off-screen, Eastwood later admitted, he was often drunk, volatile, and unpredictable. Crew memoirs describe Burton arriving on set reeking of whiskey, slurring lines until multiple takes were needed, and lashing out when challenged. For Eastwood, who valued discipline and quiet professionalism, it was a nightmare. He later told Film Comment that Burton was brilliant but troubled, a man who could dominate a room and destroy it in the same breath. What Eastwood saw, he would later call evil in disguise, not because Burton was malicious in intent, but because his addictions made him unreliable, dangerous to colleagues, and corrosive to trust. One night, according to production staff, Burton erupted in a shouting match with a producer so loudly the Alpine Hotel walls shook. And yet audiences never saw it. They saw the swagger, the command. Eastwood never forgot the duality. Burton embodied the Hollywood contradiction, adored in public, destructive in private. To Clint, that was its own kind of evil, not theatrical, but eroding, slow, and merciless. Sean Penn. When Clint Eastwood directed Mystic River in 2003, the film became a critical triumph, winning Sean Penn an Academy Award for Best Actor. But Eastwood, reflecting years later, hinted that working with Penn was like riding a live wire. Penn, known for his explosive temper and outspoken politics, clashed with authority wherever he went. On set, crew members described him as electric on camera but mercurial off it. Eastwood's minimalist directing style, few takes, little explanation, frustrated Penn, who thrived on digging deep, rehearsing endlessly, and challenging notes. The tension peaked during a key scene where Penn's character collapses in grief. Eastwood insisted on moving quickly, trusting Penn's first take. Penn reportedly fought for more, claiming the emotional gravity deserved repetition. Eastwood held the line. According to the New York Times, Penn stormed off set, only to return hours later in silence. Eastwood later reflected that Penn's brilliance came at a cost. His volatility drained those around him, creating an atmosphere of walking on eggshells. For Eastwood, evil didn't mean monstrous crimes. It meant the corrosion of community, the way one person's unchecked ego could turn collaboration into combat. The irony? That same rawness gave Mystic River its haunting power. The very energy that Eastwood condemned as corrosive was also what won Oscars. But Eastwood never forgot the scars it left on the crew. To him, Penn symbolized the paradox of Hollywood. Art born from pain, but pain spread recklessly. Madonna. By the late 1980 seconds, Madonna had already conquered music and was pushing aggressively into film. Eastwood, by then an industry veteran, watched her attempts with growing skepticism. Their paths officially crossed in Hollywood circles during the early 1990 seconds, when Madonna's reputation for being combative, demanding, and often dismissive of colleagues was already widespread. Though Eastwood never directed her directly, he was candid in interviews that he considered her brand of celebrity corrosive to the craft of cinema. A 1991 Vanity Fair profile documented her diva behavior on set, with crew members describing a woman who demanded control at every level and mocked directors she didn't respect. For Eastwood, who had built a reputation on quiet authority and collaboration, this was anathema. He saw in Madonna a new breed of Hollywood power, fame without discipline. And while she dazzled audiences with spectacle, insiders reported that she left behind bruised egos and wrecked productions. From Bloodhounds of Broadway, 1989, to Shanghai Surprise, 1986. In later years, when asked about celebrity culture overtaking artistry, Eastwood allegedly gestured toward Madonna as an example of how showmanship could devour sincerity. To him, the evil wasn't cartoonish. It was the erosion of respect, the way an icon could make film sets hostile, careers miserable, and truth irrelevant. Fans adored her. Critics wavered. Eastwood remained firm. She was proof that Hollywood's golden promise could sour into arrogance that poisoned every room it entered. Leonardo DiCaprio. When Clint Eastwood cast Leonardo DiCaprio as J. Edgar Hoover in the 2011 biopic J. Edgar, it was supposed to be a passing of the torch, an elder statesman director guiding one of Hollywood's brightest young stars. The result was more complicated. DiCaprio, famous for his method-like intensity, pushed for exhaustive research, endless retakes, and deep dives into character psychology. Eastwood, who preferred brisk, efficient shoots, grew increasingly frustrated. According to The Hollywood Reporter, crew members noted the clash of styles. DiCaprio wanted 10 takes, Eastwood wanted 2. Their disagreements spilled quietly into industry chatter. While both men remained professional in public, Eastwood later hinted in private interviews that DiCaprio represented a kind of Hollywood entitlement, a belief that artistry excused draining everyone else's time and energy. The irony? DiCaprio's performance was praised, though the film itself underwhelmed at the box office. And that, for Eastwood, sealed the verdict. The chaos wasn't worth the return. He never worked with DiCaprio again. And in Reflections, Eastwood reportedly categorized the younger actor as a talent too wrapped in his own reflection. To Eastwood, that level of self-absorption wasn't just frustrating, it was corrosive. And corrosive, in Clint's language, always bordered on evil. Charlton Heston. Some evils, Eastwood believed, weren't confined to sets. They echoed through politics. Charlton Heston, the legendary star of Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments, spent his later years as the face of the National Rifle Association. Eastwood, himself a lifelong gun owner and sometimes Republican ally, still found Heston's crusading rhetoric alarming. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, as gun violence escalated, Heston delivered fiery speeches that polarized Hollywood. Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine immortalized Heston as an unflinching defender of weapons in the wake of tragedy. Eastwood, who prided himself on nuance, saw in Heston something darker. A man willing to inflame, divide, and grandstand, even when the human cost was unbearable. He respected Heston's cinematic legacy, but called his political crusade misguided at best, destructive at worst. According to contemporaneous accounts in Variety, to Eastwood, evil wasn't only in personal cruelty, it was in the refusal to see consequences, the arrogance of ideology placed above lives. And in Heston, he saw that arrogance crystallized. Their feud wasn't loud, it was ideological. But for Eastwood, it cemented Heston's place on the list. Hollywood glory, he concluded, didn't absolve moral blindness. So what did Eastwood actually mean when he used the word evil? Not demons, not tabloid scandal, but the quieter poisons. Egos unchecked, tempers that corroded crews, addictions that destroyed trust, politics that weaponized fame. Each actor, in his view, represented a different face of the same truth, that stardom can magnify the very worst in human nature. It wasn't about blame, it was about consequences. When one person's power dominates, everyone else pays. And Eastwood, in his twilight years, decided that was worth naming out loud. Picture it, the old cowboy at 94, sitting in a wooden chair, the light catching the creases of a face that has watched Hollywood rise, collapse, and rise again. He's not pointing a gun this time, he's pointing a finger. And the names he calls out aren't fictional villains, they're the peers and rivals who prove that fame can rot from the inside. So what do you think? Was Eastwood right to call them evil? Or is he rewriting history in his own image? What's your read? Power, timing, or values? Drop your take below.